First of all, I want to discuss Jane's personal family background. And it was lovely to read in this book about the Tennison family and the relationship between Jane and her sister Pam, and how Mrs. Tennison feels about Jane being in the police force and how she struggles to cope with it throughout the book. How did you feel painting the early years of the Tennison family for this book and writing about the Tennisons as Jane is just starting out in the police force?
The enjoyment for me to be able to create a family background for Jane Tennison. Although in Prime Suspect we had introduced the mother, sister, father, they were quite a restrained relationship because they hadn't watched her on TV when she was doing some promotion in police work. To go back in time, that if at the age Jane Tennison came onto the screen, she was distant from her family. The joy for me was writing when that occurred. That her sister Pam, who is a hairdresser, has absolutely nothing whatsoever connected to her sister. She doesn't particularly ever think of herself in any way other than special because she works in a hair salon and she does tints. And she's a colourist, she's a colourist. She only wants to be married, have children. And for her sister to be a policewoman is rather embarrassing, actually. Her mother is just fearful for her. She doesn't understand how any girl would want to put herself in the uniform, but also put herself at risk. The father is he's quite proud of her. But it's like she's almost an alien in her own family. They don't understand why would any girl want to subject herself to being a policewoman. Her first probationary department is Hackney Police Station, which is one of the toughest areas in London. And so she never ever tells them the reality of her work, what she's doing. She will cover and say, I'm just making teas, really. I'm on probation, I don't do a lot. When actually she's in the thick of it. And it gets thicker and thicker and darker and darker. It would be lovely if she was able to turn to either parent to say, I'm scared, but she has no one really. She's dependent on the relationships within a police station to become family.
One of the things I felt you managed to do wonderfully in Tennyson was transport the reader into the early 70s in East London when Tennyson was set, and really portray just how violent and rough some of those areas were. What kind of research did you do to ensure you captured the right feeling and atmosphere of that era?
I was very fortunate to have working alongside me an ex-detective who worked at Hackney Police Station. Not only had he worked there in the 70s, but he also married a policewoman who had worked there. And it's actually her uniform that we're here. And this is his old number. So it's a very close relationship for him to take me back in time to exactly how the station was run. And also it's an era that I know very, very well, because I was about 4. The rock and roll. I love all the music. And the research into the darkness and the violence is quite easy to do because there's so much footage. We've only got to see recently released footage of Mad Frankie Fraser and all the footage of the Krays, and then you've got the new Kray film out. It's very easy to actually consider the violence of that period, and it's the insidiousness and how the police were so terribly young. You forget. Sometimes you may notice today a very young police officer in uniform with the hat on, makes him look like Noddy. But the reality was there was an awful lot of young recruits. Some of them didn't pan out very well. Others did. and others became very crooked. And so it's a world that I'm going to have a wonderful time expanding.
We all know Jane Tennison as being one of the most tough as nail cops in fiction, brought to life famously and magnificently on television by Helen Mirren. One of the challenges reading Tennison was remembering that Jane wasn't always as tough as she appears in the Mirren years. Here she is very young, vulnerable and naive, but also keen to work hard and excel in her blossoming career. How was it breathing life into the young version of one of your most loved characters and showing us just how she was before she became what she is now?
I really enjoyed having the, it's hard to say pleasure, but you know what it was like to say, Jane Tennison came onto the screen in Prime Suspect, tough, cool, level-headed, able to deal with discrimination. And one of her most memorable scenes is taking over a dead man's shoes. And she says, I've worked hard for my rank, and I want this position. So how do you get, in that day and age, a woman to arrive at that position in her life? And the officer I worked with during the research of the original Prime Suspect was DCI Jackie Moulton. So I focused everything on the Jackie that I knew. Her experiences, she talked through crime, she talked to me all the time. But I never wrote back. I never wrote her family, where she was when she was young, what was she like. So the joy of doing Tennison is to see the development of a very young, naive girl grow. And she grows into Jane Tennison. Eventually, she has to go through a very, very big growth period. She's only 22. Even at 22, she shows and gives signals in the first book, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more books, but in the first book, she's showing signs of her ability. You know, if it's at the autopsy or questions, the lecture, she's hungry at that lecture. She's not freaked by a lecture into, horrendous murder. She wants to learn. She wants to learn about forensic. And what will actually happen is the calmness will begin. But she's got a long way to go.
Tennison is certainly crime-filled and a book that's kind of split into a two-parter almost. There is a main crime in the first half, and just when that's timed up, another crime evolves in the second half of the book. Were any of the crimes in Tennison based on or derived from real-life events you came across while researching for Tennison?
I really attempted in Tennison to almost have an underbelly happening. Like, I keep dropping in hints. There's something else going on. But the focus is on a murder inquiry. So I want the reader to keep on thinking, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong with this family, the Bentleys. It's also, for me, to show, again, what it's like for a young female officer who's first terrified, probably for the first time in her life. And she never will forget that voice. And so by the time the crime, we suddenly realise, we've missed the biggie. Here it's coming, my God. And she takes the risk. She says, I know that man. And so that was very much based on various different crimes that I've read of, I researched. I can never base any single storyline on a real-life crime. I have to juggle. Mm-hmm. So when I meet the victim's family who have suffered a murder, I will suction from them reaction. I don't want to do their specific daughter's murder or their son's. I pick up reaction. I pick up from them how was it? Describe what it was like when somebody, hello, can we come in? It's the awful moment where somebody says, can we come in and talk to you? When your child is missing. That knock on the door. Now the in the present police days now, slightly comforted, and they'll give you what they call a liaison officer. But that, every mother's nightmare, every father's tragic moment, because he's got to prop up the mother. And you see, when I say tragic moment, that's what one of the parents I've interviewed said. You knew it was tragic. So just the cop walked in. And he said, can you bring your wife in? So I just suction it, twist it around. And the arm, you know, the big robbery in it is, well, we just had another one. But when it happened, I couldn't believe it in the press. I thought, oh my God, they've copied the book. I can't say too much because it'll ruin the story in the book. But yeah, of course, suction. Yeah.
I think you captured that, just to go off on a slight tangent, you captured that quite well, because I watched part one of the final act again last night, and that deals, obviously, as you know, with the missing 14-year-old girl, and when they find the body, and they go around to tell the parents, and as you say, it's the knock on the door, and the denial and the disbelief that their daughter has been found and she's dead. And what you said there just made me think of that bit there.
Yeah, you see, and it's also because, I mean, what I didn't want to do was be repetitive, because young heroin addict, this is different, because it is the lack, you know, that heroin was just beginning to really move in the early 70s. Yes, the hippies and everything in the 60s, but you see, that's all the joy of this for me, going into the hippie house and things like that, but also the deadly, slow movement of heroin and heroin addiction. And you say, you know, most young prostitutes were addicted to heroin.
There's definitely parts of you in the book, because we know that she's a big Janis Joplin fan as
well.
So that's a lovely addition. Yeah. Okay. No one could argue that Dame Helen Mirren could be bettered playing Jane Tennison on television, an outstanding performance of a character who embodies everything about being the only woman in a male-dominated industry, fighting with sexism and prejudice, but also her own demons about being unmarried and not having children. These are elements you've no doubt been looking at when casting your young Jane in the TV adaptation of Tennison. So how difficult was it to find an actress to play her who you knew you could trust to handle what would go on to be such an iconic character?
The casting of Jane Tennison has not yet happened. And we're going to spread the net. I want an unknown, and I will make her a star.
So what will you be looking for then, in which case?
So what I have to look for is that if you were to describe Helen Mirren, whose iconic performance is obviously so brilliant, but Helen Mirren also has an incredible weight to her. Not heavy, not fat. She has a weight. She walks with a weight, which is why she was so brilliant as the Queen. You know, the Queen has got weight. You see those little feet of the Queen, bam, bam, there she is. You know, all that walking. Helen has the same weight. She also doesn't do a lot of hand gestures. That was taught to me by the police officer, and I repeated it to Helen. Don't fold your arms. Keep still. In a man's world, if you're doing a lot of gestures, I want everybody to listen to me. You're there. They won't listen. I want everybody to listen to me. Keep your voice down. So we learned from the real policewoman how she has to behave. So I have to look for an actress, a young actress, who's going to be able to develop into Jane. It's going to be very hard. And we've been compiling hopefuls. But the hunt is on. I myself will put myself forward. But you know what I mean? It's going to be hard.
Okay.
Unknown.
Okay. And do you know when it will be airing next year?
No. We don't start shooting till early next year.
Okay.
So I would say it's 2000, probably 17 come out. It will come out. Truthfully, I want my book to come out and have a good role.
Yeah.
You know. Then, because what I don't want is somebody with the book going, wait a minute, on page 42 she says this. You know, I want them to say, okay, we had a great read, and now I want to have a look what La Plante has come up with. And hope, because the music's going to drive it. I do not want another, show coming out with another cop doing this, doing that, another police station. It's 70s. It's rock and roll. And I don't just want to have Janis Joplin in a little bit of a... I want to find a Janis Joplin lookalike. I want to find a Janis Joplin singer. So that when she comes in with an energy. That song, break another little piece of my heart, you hear it banging out. And it's very exciting. At the same time, Nights in White Satin has got to break your heart when it's played. And so I need an energy in this show that we have never seen before. Okay?
Okay, it's wonderful, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Nick.